I call Brendan Horan.
Thank you, Mr Chair, for the call. I'd like to take just a brief call on part 1 of the bill. It establishes WorkSafe New Zealand as a standalone body, a Crown entity. It takes the important occupational health and safety work that was only recently folded into the super ministry MOBI, the Minister of Business, Innovation and Employment, and places that important work into a separate entity, WorkSafe New Zealand. And so it does that because that work cannot be done well, it cannot be done effectively, and it cannot be done reliably in a super ministry. In Clause 9, sir, the bill provides that the main objective of WorkSafe is, and I quote, to promote and contribute to the prevention of harm of all people at work and in or in the vicinity of the workplace, securing the health and safety of workers and workplaces. That's a pretty big ask, sir, and one the Chief Executive and the Board of WorkSafe will have to work hard to achieve. Their work will be scrutinised. They will be held to account for the safety of every New Zealand family that hopes that their fathers and mothers return home safe, return home alive at the end of each day. And I wish them well. And so I would draw attention to the forestry industry and some of the tragic injuries and fatalities that have occurred there. Mr Chair, in Clause 10 we have a baker's dozen of functions that WorkSafe must discharge in order to fulfil its Clause 9 objective, and I'd like to turn to subpart 3 because this legislation is not only about the health and safety of all workers and all workplaces, but it also transfers the employment of around about 300 people. And I'm speaking about the people who today are working for health and safety, the group of MOBI, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. When this bill comes into force, they will keep doing the same job, but their employer will, at the stroke of a pen, become WorkSafe New Zealand. And this isn't uncommon. Governments reorganise the public sector from time to time. Indeed, some say too often. But reorganisation has been happening since the time of Petronius Arbiter, if I'm to believe the apocryphal quotation attributed to that long-dead Roman, but I digress. What is important is that the employment protections of the 300 workers are protected. A newspaper article caught my eye around about a month ago, and it was the story of a teacher aide in Whanganui who had lost entitlement to paid parental leave because while she was doing the same job at the same site, her employer had technically changed from one school board of trustees to another. She had fallen therefore between the cracks. And when I looked at this Health and Safety Pike River Implementation Bill, as reported by the Select Committee, I saw that in Clause 12 it explicitly protected the KiwiSaver rights and the Employment Relations Act coverage of the 300 workers being transferred, but it seems that people amongst the 300 workers with new babies might lose parental leave. So I released an SOP and I wrote to the Honourable Minister Simon Bridges at more or less the same time, and to give the Minister credit, he and I spar at times in this House. There is sometimes a little tauranga tension, but on this occasion he accepted the point, he undertook to obtain urgent advice, and he undertook to address the issue of transferred employees and parental leave, to address it in a government SOP. And I was happy with that, but then the Minister went and did better. With my resources, I'd been able to release an SOP to protect not only KiwiSaver and Employment Relations Act right and add parental leave, but the Minister, with the entire machinery of government available, identified a better solution, and it is the revised Clause 12, which is on SOP 374. And it simply says, Mr Chair, that the employment of a transferred employee by WorkSafe New Zealand is treated as continuous employment for the purposes of any enactment. And that's a great solution. The 300 workers who are working for MOBI today will, when this Act comes into force, be treated as having continuous employment and will lose no rights, no entitlements that are available to them under any Act of Parliament. And I thank Simon Bridges for that. And I find it, I can't believe I'm saying this, sir, but I hope this can become a standard piece of drafting for a future transfer of employment legislation. I note that in the Social Housing Reform, Housing Restructuring and Tenancy Matters Amendment Bill, which the government has indicated will progress this week, it is proposed to transfer some Housing New Zealand staff into the Ministry of Social Development, Mr Chair.
Brendan Horan.
Transfer some Housing New Zealand staff into the Ministry of Social Development, and I would hope that the Minister, Nick Smith, in charge of that bill, will be able to follow the lead of his colleague, Minister Simon Bridges, and incorporate the substance of this Clause 12 into that bill. Mr Chair, I will conclude by saying that I hope the establishment of WorkSafe New Zealand is the beginning of safer workplaces in our nation. I hope, sir, that they will be, as my colleague said before me, fully and adequately funded and resourced so that their fathers and their mothers, their sons and their daughters will return safe at the end of each day.
The Honourable Simon Bridges.